find the personal or dumb ones. And also, if you're interested, sometime years ago, when we did something similar in another city of getting new people, in the first night of the questions, I wrote down what the questions were going to, what the responses, or what the questions would be. The point I was about to make was, you can take this as fact. I could have written the questions, which leaves you, as always, in life with two immediate possibilities. One is I'm a mind reader with great mystical gifts, which the other one is how predictable people are, even under conditions wherein you might expect something extremely otherwise. If you want to start on a light note, I'll put it this way. About the deepest philosophical question I got was something like, where do you buy your clothes? It's understandable. I'm not making fun of it. It's understandable. But consider the questions. Consider what you would ask if you ran across somebody that knew something. The few things based on it I was going to go ahead and cover. This is not a theoretical exposition of some kind. It is not a philosophical searching of some kind. It is about something very specific, and I gave you about as much intro as I care to last Friday, making references to Buddhism and great secret works and Tibetan efforts to do this and that, because looking back serves no great purpose other than the fact that if you're talking about something that's beyond someone's experience, which is what I'm talking about, that's literally beyond someone's experience, then you have to use materials that are in their experience for it to make anything resembling sense. But to continue to look to the past, which is the most common way, or to say that this is a revision of something or other, modern-day Sufism or Zen or Jewish mysticism, is not true. And my only responsibility is not to talk to you about anything. I don't mean to overdo that. My own responsibility, and it's self-imposed. I don't have any choices. I don't talk to you about anything that I do not understand, that I have not experienced. And what this is about an experience that is quite literal. And it's not about theory. And one or two of the other inquiries I know people always have, I do not represent anyone. I do not have a teacher. I'm not a front for anyone, and this is not a continuation of some great mystical line of succession that you can trace to somebody else. Some of you may know I wrote some books in the past publicly years ago, and I've said things using somebody else's name, but it was simply as bait. At one time I was trying to, well, I assume all of you knew I used the name of the Gurdjieff, because at the time I was trying to find, if you will pardon an extreme oxymoron, I was trying to find the sanest of the kind of insane people normally drawn to that sort of thing. And I'm moving us back now. I know they still got organizations going on, but this was 20 years ago. And right then he was sort of at a flash point in the United States. The discovery in the West of would-be New Agers had not really hit the mother lode of Sufism, and I thought, it seemed at the time that he was going to be perhaps the magnet that would draw the sanest of the kind of normally rather questionable people who get attracted to such as this. No particular offense to you, because here I am talking to you. But normally when you put out a call of some kind and say there's going to be some sort of lectures or something on mysticism, normally what you end up with, in case you hadn't thought about it, can be very strange people. You're no stranger than in the past, but what you normally get is the edges of ordinary intellectual society. Notice I say intellectual. You normally get people that in a sense have the makings to be interested in this. That is, they are to some degree rebels, that they have already rejected through various processes parts of ordinary existence. Religion, let's say, organized religion, take an easy one. But then there is such a fine line that it does not really exist, that one must walk. That is strictly a figure of speech because you didn't choose to do it, but it's just a very fine line as to whether you go over that line and become a critic of life, which is damn near impossible not to do. To look around and think, well, I'm just taking my best objective observation of life, I'm speaking for an ordinary person, and they look around and think, but I am absolutely, at least in part, surrounded by goddamn idiots, by dangerous people, by criminals. And if there is no rational defense of that, I'm not going to argue the fact, but to be a critic of life has nothing to do with this. And yet, as I said, you have got to be in some way already a rebel of sorts, a kind of, figuratively speaking, a young Turk out in the intellectual streets of the city, and you keep looking for barricades to get behind, but you can't toss Molotov cocktails at the establishment. That is, established ideas. It's a waste of time, at the very least. I'm being charitable to say it's a waste of time. It is self-defeating. It will keep you tied to your present position. It is about literally an experience, and I'm not going to keep calling it, when I have to, I may say the enlightenment or awakening of consciousness, but those of you that show back up tonight, I'm going to give you something much more specific that you probably have already seen in some of the things I'd written, and I'm sure some of what the people here had been talking to you about, even though I didn't know, because one night I was here and they asked me to draw my old diagram of the human nervous system, is how I know that you at least seen that. Tonight I was going to give you an expanded one, but let me repeat, I am not representing anybody, there's nobody behind me, there's no organization, you got nowhere else to look. That's kind of, I know crummy when it comes to imaginary hero worship. Of course, then I think God knows if you need me as a hero, you can fill in your joke. On the other side of that, by the way, let me also say this to clear it up once and for all. Insofar as me trying to impress you or to sell you on something or to encourage you in a commercial sense in any ordinary way, that is, in some way I need you, this all gets very tricky. And verbally it is an absolute dead end, but to me this would answer the question, so I'm going to give it to you. When you, and I know I got plenty of questions on the basis like, well, when did you have them put out these public flyers? What is it you want from me? And when's the secret going to come out? When's the shoe going to drop? And what is it you want from me? Listen to me. This would answer it for me, whether I'm being literally correct or not. If I could have found, I would have cut off my right foot when I was 20 years old if I could have found me. Does that answer it? Now that's where it is, and I'm not impressed by me. But this is now. So I've known me a long time since then. But all the questions which I know of what I was looking for, if I could have found me, I literally, it's frightening. If I had found a me, which justice works, I didn't, but if I had found a me at that time, and the guide said, all right, or the woman said, all right, I know exactly what it is you want, and I can tell you how to do it. I can damn near slap you into it, but you're going to have to cut off your foot. That's not really funny because I might be limping now. I say that to you in all good humor and good faith, insofar as you're worrying about or concerned about how much you impress me or what I would do to keep you here or what I would do to try in some way to intellectually seduce you. You can forget it. I don't impress me, and very shortly, if you have any pre-wired dead reckoning for this sort of activity, then you'll lose the idea of, I don't impress you. That's not the point. So maybe we cleared up some of that, and if we didn't, it's your fault. If you consider a drawing, planet Earth, and you remember my drawing of the human nervous system. But now let me do it just a little. I could still draw the large one, which represented the human brain. But let's do it a slightly different way of man's brain divided, and that still being the level of consciousness. There is, among other things, this is not the only one, but there is simply an electrical current that's running through the planet Earth, that runs through every human. Being alive is you completing, as they say in electronics or in the field of electricity, you close the circuit. They sometimes say complete, and since I've already used closed system in another way having to do with life itself, but you surely remember your high school physics, but it's like if you saw a power line hanging down and grab it, to your eternal chagrin perhaps. There is a circuit. It is what being alive is, literally, among other things. There is a little more involved. But you are a conduit for it, as long as you're alive. And it is coming up, and as far as which way I draw this, don't let your imagination get you whether it goes I draw it from the left foot to the right. But it goes up a leg. It goes up the spine, and it goes to one side of the brain. And it has to jump. Where it jumps in you is the level of consciousness. And it goes back down. That is being alive on this planet. As you get older, you become less of a good conduit for it. When you stop completing the circuit, you die. It's that simple. You no longer carry the electrical charge from the planet. To be in this condition is a collective, automatic state, because all that represents thus far is being alive. And if you would also like to consider, there is another place, I'm not going to tell you, but it's lower down the brainstem, that you could physically be alive, but you would not be a human. You would not be conscious by any definition. It's by a medical, physiological, neurological, everyday definition. You could not speak. You would have no brain activity in the cerebral cortex, more or less. But we're now talking about it gets up to the cerebral cortex, that you are just an ordinary person. You are alive if you're completing that circuit. But that circuit is collective. That is the collective intelligence of humanity. That is the collective consciousness. I never did say absolutely in my little preface one more time, to back up. This is about an actual experience. And you can find traces of it, and that's not the point, but since I brought it up, the Enlightenment. That's probably the best known. That's exactly what this is. It shifts a little bit, but it is not the same. What would awaken, what would enlighten Buddha 2,500 years ago, in a sense, if he popped up right now, what he did then wouldn't work. That's not absolutely correct, by the way. But I want you to understand it's not a matter of digging up a book somewhere, no matter what worked. If we take the story of Buddha as being absolute fact, and that if I told you that I even knew more specifically of what he did, there's enough in the so-called written records that you could spend the rest of your life attempting to physically imitate what he did, by all reports. It would not do it to you. It's not efficient. You could pursue it. I'm not saying that there have not been people that started doing that and did finally find out what was going on. It's not that it would kill you, but it is not efficient. And the point I was trying to get you to consider was, even were he here now, and he had his same degree of consciousness that he had 2,500 years ago, and suddenly he popped up again, and he and I met, and he said, "Oh, I see what you're up to." And he said, "I need it now if I'm going to be back alive." He would have enough sense to say, "You got any hints?" Because if he had enough sense, I know I'm playing with time and space, but if he popped back to life now on this planet, he would know that what he did 2,500 years ago, he'd ask me, like, well, give me a hint, give me a suggestion. He would know that it's not going to be quite enough. It is literally about an experience, and I'll be point blank, I'll tell you what it is, and it's according to what you want. When you start, I could have said, instead of just random questions, I could have said, well, I've done this kind of game. Well, I'm glad you people showed up, or I could have sent word from the back room. Well, I'm not going to talk until you write questions. I want to know what it is you want out of life. Not the horizontal physical. I'm not here to teach you how to make $1 million overnight and second mortgages or whatever. But if I said, what is it of an esoteric nature? What is it you want? And you'd written, say, I want to be enlightened, I'd like to reach Buddhahood, or I'd like, etc. It's all one thing. It is an absolute neural experience. It's not just the brain, it's the whole nervous system. It has to be. It's why you are already genetically built for it, inclined for it, or you're not. And it's all varying degrees, because you may found it interesting, you may have been pursuing it as a hobby, even though quite likely you took it very seriously to you. But it's all a matter of degree. But the experience seems to strike one in the head, because that's the place that you have to interpret it. That's how you interpret life as a human. It's not that the physical life is not pleasurable, but you do not interpret being a spiritual, a creature attempting to do something, whatever you think this is. You know it's not physical. Well, you should know it. I know that there are disciplines that say attempting to do so-called yoga exercises, so-called zazen, just sitting somewhere, dancing. I know that there are physical disciplines that purport to lead to it, but that is extremely crude. Oh, you will never live long enough. It'd be an accident. It's just inefficient. There is an experience, and I'll give you the best description I can. Sort of. I'll give you the only one without misleading you. No matter what you think of it, there is a condition inside of an individual human. It is strictly an individual experience. You simply know what's going on. I don't know. That's the best sales pitch I got. That doesn't sound, maybe with all the bells and whistles and lightning bolts and maybe Buddhahood, the awakening from a lifelong state of hazy, sleepy consciousness. Oh, that sounds better. But it still amounts to the same thing. Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, everybody, all of those, and the ones you never heard of. It happened, and it was real. They looked around and went, well, I'll be damned. They didn't say that out loud. It's just, and you know what's going on. That's it. I guess I should stop here for a second and say, since I've already told you what the payoff is, if that's not what you had in mind. You know. Of course, if it is, I can assure you, as common as that description may have sounded, it is incomparable. You simply understand what life's about. This condition, you are alive. It has nothing to do with education. Doesn't matter whether you... Education and knowing what's going on are just two different things. There's nothing wrong with education, but it has nothing to do with expanding consciousness. I'm going to stop that in a minute because I'm going to give you people a more specific description of it. There is a time, it's not necessary for you to know the exact number, but in the tens of thousands of times per second, there is a jump going on. You would never find it through a neurological study, but you can feel it. You can become aware of it. In fact, that is what I was going to direct you to as the most efficient, immediate method to use, is that you have constantly, as long as you're alive, it is running up one of your legs into the spine. It is going up, going to one side of the brain, and it makes a leap right behind the forehead, and it's in the tens of thousands per second. The number's not important, but you can begin to feel it. It manifests itself in ordinary consciousness by eye blinks, by eye shifts, and when you get really good, all of that's just sort of parlor tricks, but you can begin to see it in people's eyes, and you can begin to feel it in yours, because your eyes are constantly moving, even if it will not show up on the pupil, because it's the focus behind it. It's either that or you're staring, which is the same thing. Maybe I'll get to it. It's even a more problematic condition. Because the worst thing is it can pass for deep reflection. In fact, there's a nice synonym, rumination. Unless some of you people know that also cows, in case you ever want to go out and look at a cow or a sheep, they can stare off with the best of them. They can't do much eye stuff. You just have to imagine that they're going, but they can sure stare. But not to worry, most people can outstare them. It jumps. It jumps right through here and is doing it constantly. It must jump for you to complete the electrical circuit, for you to intellectually stay alive. I repeat one more time, it's of no importance. But further down the brainstem, it can jump. It does jump, but you no longer feel it there. Someday I might point out to you, you can feel it, but you're not normally aware of it. And it would keep you physically alive, because you were already making that kind of completion of the electrical circuit before you became verbal, when you were still just in your diapers, before you could speak. But now, for you to be a human, for you to live as a human, it is continually jumping thousands of times per second, and it completes the circuit, and it goes back. You are alive and you are conscious in the common sense of the word, that you can think and you can speak. You can remember abstractly, as they like to say. You are simply conscious. You are conscious, though, at a level that is common. It is collective. And it is absolutely beyond your control. Ordinary people deny that. Ordinary people cannot see it. But if this is the extent to which you are conscious, your consciousness is absolutely beyond your control. And if I was here attempting to sell something, I can make them up as fast as I could talk to give you little tests, give you little tricks to go try by yourself with other people. That if you did it and you were attempting to see what I was talking about, you would see that under any ordinary condition, it is a base canard. It is an astounding illusion to believe that your consciousness is under your control. They may have already told you in some of those public meetings, I have the acid test. I tell people every 10 or 12 years and they try to run me off the planet. No, they don't. People just ignore it. The acid test is quite simple. Tell me what you're going to say next. Just start anytime you want to. I mean, you can start now or wait until you make some comment like, well, when do you want me to start? Well, when did you know where I'm going, don't you? You can say, well, what do you mean? And I go, when did you decide to ask me, what do you mean? Mm-hmm. And under any ordinary condition, I do not care how intelligent you are, what your IQ is. In fact, you should be ashamed if your IQ is above average and you can't see it. It should be a new level of shame, but it's not. You do not know what you're going to say next. There's no sense to stay and dwell on that much, because it either gives people a kind of a metaphorical migraine, or it will almost make your brain shut down. It will almost make awareness. It will almost interfere with the spark, which if it's along that far, you can use that. But right now, when an ordinary person hears that, if they hear it at all, I put it to you simple to start with. Tell me what you're going to say next. I'm assuming that you people get the tacit inference is you talk. I'm not even getting into brain activity. I'm getting into that which seems to be rather physical and mundane, talk. You have no idea what you're going to say next. And yet here you are, you're a doctor, an attorney, an accountant. I know oftentimes people will prepare a speech if you're going to appear at the next accountants convention and they want you to deliver a speech on a specific topic. But you turn around constantly with important things. Doctors making decisions, police arresting somebody. Life goes on. You're making decisions that would apparently affect forever, or at long range, your social life. And you simply have been talking all your life. It goes on. You, the president, the pope, the prime ministers of countries, everybody. And if they had some reason to see it, and I could play some sort of genie and leap into their brain right quick, or suddenly leap up inside their shirt and go, what are you about to say? When did you plan to say just what you said? You know, who are you? When did you ask? You planned to say, you planned to ask me who I am. What the hell is this? You decide to say. Nobody knows what they're going to say next. The payoff is that the ordinary mind will have to blink and look off and go back to this condition, is to realize that you have run absolutely that you can run, properly run, on what amounts to an electrical autopilot. That you talk, you make decisions, you change jobs, you quit jobs, you insult people, you get down there into fights, you threaten to leave your wife or husband, and you have no idea that you're going to say that before you said it. That alone, if there was any widespread interest in activity like this, that alone you could get up and announce in some big area, and suddenly people of all religious persuasions, etc., would abandon their church and they'd start a new religion with that. I don't know what they'd call it other than the, my God. The my God, I never realized that religion. But of course they won't, because it is not comforting. Talk about your understatement. It's simply, to an ordinary mind, if you could make them see it, it offers no comfort whatsoever. You're just left with the feeling that if an ordinary mind could see it, they would suddenly be left with the startling, unprofitable realization that I am just simply walking, you can either call it a robot or a time bomb. And yet here I am, I'm 40, I'm 50 years old, I've had 3 wives, I've made $1 million, I lost it once, I've made it back. I drive around a car, I drive down I even pulled the expressway thing on people one time, but it seems real physical. But it's the same operation, it's the same fact that life itself is alive. But if you can't deal with the one about you don't know what you're going to say next, got there on the expressway going home, you're either thinking or somebody's with you and you're talking about important matters, interesting matters, and you and all these people, just a foot away from you, you're doing 80 miles an hour. And if you think that the people are responsible for traffic either staying in their lane and you getting home or not, your perception, your understanding of what's going on in life is still extremely minimal. You don't drive home. It's a miracle. If you want to look, I'm assuming you'll get what I'm about to say. In a sense, it is a miracle that you get on the expressway and get home. Not just you, everybody. But the thing is, you and all those people didn't drive home. Life drove home. And it's not just the danger of 80 miles an hour bumper to bumper. I can say other things. It's almost a miracle before you get on the expressway that you got there and you look and your car is almost out of gas and you stop down at a market. It is almost a miracle that you get out of the market, pull the pump, it turns on, you put in the gas, your car doesn't blow up, nobody kills you, you don't fall down dead, that you go in and the person says, what pump? And you tell them the number and they go, like, oh. And you pay and they give you change and you walk out and get in your car. That is almost a miracle. Think about it. Because did you plan any of it? When I say it's a miracle, it's when you realize the condition in which you live, which takes many people a good part of a lifetime. Probably some of you think you have already been involved with in some way of trying to study yourself, or you can look back at Socrates and the Greek idea of the unexamined life not worth living, and I'm sure that some of you has probably been around some would-be mystical group of some kind that was one of it's a tried and historically sound method of trying to continually observe yourself in action, to study yourself. But that's easy to say. I can give you again an acid test, because some of you, let's assume there's someone sitting here that believes they've been involved with that and really thinks they've made progress. You've made no progress whatsoever if what I just talked about getting home, being able to buy gas and get in your car, and it actually, you filled up your car with gas and paid for it and got change back and got back in the car. Forget getting on the expressway, that you just did that much. If you don't understand that that is somewhere very close to a miracle, you hadn't really begun to observe much. Because what you have to observe is the condition in which you live up here, which doesn't matter once you see it, because you realize if you describe this to people, ordinary people, and you made them, in some way you had the impact on them that they felt that that's true. You know, through my charm and charisma, that I told them that, and they went, oh, and they suddenly saw it. What good would that have done? It would almost immobilize them, an ordinary mind, to realize that I'm 40 years old, I'm an ordinary person, and you just made me suddenly see that I have lived 40 years and I was not conscious. Of course, this does not happen, but you understand what I'm getting at. If they could hold that awareness for some length of time, an inordinate, to an ordinary mind, an inordinate length of time would be a split second. They could scarce get up and go get in the car, because they'd think, I might have to stop and get gas. And now I realize, see, the miracle part is when you realize the condition you've been in, then the split second later you look around and you go, wait a minute. Because you understand at that moment, you realize it's not just me. It's 5,900,000,000, you understand. It's 6 billion other people in that same condition. I fly on airplanes with them. They give me change at the bank. I work for them. They come and repair this heavy-duty machinery that I work with every day. Then you realize it's a miracle in that sense. I am living around, they might as well be zombies. This might as well be one of those B-grade movies, Night of the Living Dead. And it's not an attack on them, you understand. Because if you start attacking other people saying, well, yeah, I agree with you, the whole world's full of idiots. You know, you might as well leave now. You ain't got it. You got to first see first that you are the leading star in this little idiocy scenario. And that's not pseudo-humility. It's not for you to go, oh, yeah, you're right, I'm not all that great. It's not a matter of great. You've got to understand that you are living at a collective level that you call consciousness that is not consciousness at all compared to what you can be a few people. Not everybody. Because once you see that, they don't need to. Look out there. The whole damn thing works. People do things collectively that you and I, we don't have time to fool with. You don't know how to build unless you're an architect. You can't build a Sears Tower. You can't build the trade towers. You couldn't put together an airplane. You couldn't even design one unless that's your field. You just can't do it. But people don't do it. Life does it. But the first time you see that it's not other people are in some way inferior, or other people are walking around in some kind of fog, see that there is proof, once you, if you can hear me at all, there is proof that you are yet to step from the fog to think that there is any sort of complaint that the rest of life in some way is coming up short. You're coming up shorter. Because they're not coming up short. Then you're left with this question. Well, if they are, how the hell do I explain? Look out there at life. We fly men to other planets. How do I explain all this? You can't. But it's a miracle. At this level, I call it, my term, you'll hear it for a while, till you get used to it, and I'll change it to something else. It is the collective level of consciousness of humanity. And we all know that it seems to vary, that you know people who seem to be smarter and people who are dumber. There's no doubt about it. But there is a collective level. It is a optimum level. But the variation between the least conscious person on this planet and the most conscious under ordinary conditions, you could not put a piece of paper through my fingers. And that may sound exaggerated, but it's not. From the lowest, the person just, not with any particular brain damage, but we all know people that you've got friends that they just, when it comes to being conscious and aware of what's going on in life, the classical, I guess in movies nowadays, you know, a surfer dude, that kind of thing. You know, a guy, just somebody kind of bopping through life and he doesn't really think much about anything. He may be a fine guy and he may have finished, he may even have a college degree. But you understand, when you think about just being conscious and just sort of being more aware of what's going on in life, you think, he is almost just walking around in a fog. If I didn't know him better, I would think that he was stoned all the time. That kind of, All right, the difference between that and whoever you might think would be the more conscious, not educated, but some philosopher somewhere, some New Age guru, or just anybody, some scientist. The variation between the two is almost nil. Now, I know at first it may strike you as not true, but once you begin to see it, it's not an attack on either one of them. The variation is beyond any significance. That is why I am speaking with, telling you not incorrectly, not misleading, that there is a level of consciousness, and it is safe to speak of it that way, because the graduations, the variations therein are of no significance. Now, I remind you from the other night, I am never speaking about people who are genetically flawed. I'm not talking about people with absolute, real physical brain damage. I am always talking about ordinary people, just ordinary, middle-of-the-road, middle-class, bourgeoisie, everyday people. In this condition, you are alive, and let's assume that you are not genetically flawed, you're not physically flawed. You are an ordinary, conscious person. Your consciousness is controlled by life absolutely. You are conscious, your consciousness is interested only in, is conscious of, and your interests are limited to things that the collective that all of humanity is interested in, which turn out to be, and these are not pejorative terms, but they are gross in the medical sense, in the legal sense. They are gross, they're common, they are mundane. But the main thing about it, once you begin to see it, is your consciousness is absolutely out of your control. People believe otherwise, and I can make up all sorts of instant allegories or repeat ones I've already made up in the past, that is one way that you can run a prison most efficiently, is tell people that they're free. And the human mind is the great example that you tell an ordinary person. You say, I heard somebody say that we never know what we're even going to say next, and that everything we think is just as predictable, is just as mechanical as the cycle of precipitation on this planet. And you tell an ordinary person that, and assuming again that they're ordinary, they go, you mean he's saying that the mind has no freedom? That's exactly what he said. And the guy goes, or the woman goes, well, that's kind of insane, isn't it? Because the mind seems to have its proof. If you tell an ordinary mind, tell your own mind. Always makes the better parable, if you know how to do it. Just tell your own, or tell somebody's mind, hey, I heard a guy say that people's mind cannot think anything it wants to. The proof seems to be that the mind can entertain that one thought. It can entertain an opinion or an idea that it's not free at all, and the mind can go, that's not true. And even if it doesn't analyze it in some philosophical way, that is operational proof to the contrary. That it can tolerate the idea, it can weigh the idea that it's not free. And go, that's just balderdash. We all know that within certain limits, but the mind's free. How do we write fiction? How do we imagine the technology of tomorrow? The mind is free, and that's the end of it. And it's like the mind just goes, I don't hear more of this. You're wasting my time. Your interest is tied. Your consciousness is forever earthbound. I can describe operationally several other things that happen in this state of you completing the electrical circuit. When it makes this jump, when it makes this leap continually in you individually and in everyone, but when it makes that leap, it also is replaying the history of man, and it also represents, not just allegorically, but it sounds that way, I know, but it represents other movements. Remember, I'm talking about now the leap from one side of your brain to the other is going on many thousands of times per second. It keeps you alive as a human, and it keeps you it keeps you conscious at the ordinary level. You can look at it as representing also not just a leap from one side of the brain to the other. It represents the move of man from a physical creature to that of more so, that is, an intellectual creature. It represents a move from the feral to the civilized. It represents a move, potentially, is the only chance we have, from the collective consciousness to the potentially individualistic. But, so to speak, lastly, I should point out what it represents overall is a movement from a direct experience of life into the living in reality, which I use in a different way, which is a story I threw on you Friday night, one of my creation stories, that everyone has the opportunity momentarily when you're created that life looks you dead in the eye, just momentarily. And as you're supposed to, most people look off. Or just think about it. If life itself staring you in the eye. And you look off, and that's it. That is the last direct experience of life that you have. It's not something that's been lost, so don't look to the past and take the common interpretations of all the creation stories, which throughout the world, not just limited to the Western world. Not going to make us look back forever, but you understand, everyone has a feeling that we've been cursed, whether you're a Christian or a Jew or not. All you got to do is hear those kinds of stories, but the religions always have one that man, very early on, really irritated the gods, did something, misspoke, misstepped, and the gods cursed him. And so that the whole idea not only of religion to most people, but people who believe that they might be interested in things transcendental, they almost always will insist that you in some way point to the past and say, well, stick with me. I've been studying with such and such master real old, and we got a whole line of succession going back 2,000 years, which right then, if you understood anything, you really understand that they're pointing in the wrong direction. But notice your mind immediately thinks, well, now we're getting somewhere. I mean, who wants to find just some upstart and you say, well, what are your credentials? And you say, well, I don't have any. Well, who did you study with? Well, nobody. You got your choice, the ordinary mind, even the ordinary mind of an ordinary mystic. You got your choice between that and a guy who studied with Yogi so-and-so, who studied with Father so-and-so, who studied around, and they trace it back thousands of years. Now we're getting somewhere. If it was genetic, we would. I'll grant you that. If you found a guy that studied with his father, and his father studied with his grandfather, and his grandfather, if we had that, and maybe a knuckle, which is what they, well, you can put together your own parts of history. That's been tried. After the fact, they've tried to say in certain areas that that did happen. But I was going to say there is built into, you could ask yourself why, there is a built-in acceptance. All you got to do is just hear it. An acceptance that we in some way have either lost something, we have been cursed. There's, in some way, we got to go back and pick up a piece somewhere. You could even take my story and say, well, we shouldn't have looked off to use your story when we had a chance to look at life and we blinked. We got to go back. You can't go back. You're on an assembly line. You were sent out. You can't go back and do it the same way again. There is no curse. The reason that men are dissatisfied, that I pointed out to you, is man is forever incomplete in the nervous system. Not physical, but in the higher end of the nervous system, he's incomplete, and nobody knows where to look. But most people are wired up in such a way that this kind of dissatisfaction is bearable, it's tolerable, and life is full, especially at the physical level, of distractions. I mean, there's not a, if you're just reasonable in your physical demands, I mean, there's enough sex, booze, drugs you never tried, movies you never seen, games you never played, ways to hurt yourself, break a leg, break the other leg, all kinds of minor hobbies that can keep you distracted for a good 60 or 70 years. There is no looking to the past. There is no mistake that was made. But you, by having an intellect, by the electrical circuit in man, now being closed at a higher level, whereas at this lower level is where it would close if we were still brutes, if we were still simply feral beasts, if we were still nothing but a body, it would be closing lower. But now that it's up here, you've got no choice. You cannot back up, was my little joke Friday about giving yourself a homemade lobotomy. That's the closest you can come to backing up. That's the closest idea of getting back to the Garden of Eden, of being able to reverse the error that Adam and Eve, our forefathers, made in offending the gods. If that was literally true, if there was any validity to that, then all it would take is for you to give yourself a lobotomy. Wipe out your intellect, and you're back in that state of grace. You're back in that state of silent grace. You would not be dissatisfied as man is now. But now that it has risen to that level, you no longer live life directly, and it's not a mistake. It's not some idea that, well, we've become too civilized. That's our trouble, which this goes on all the time, and all of you have grown up, you've seen that it pops up over and over. Let's go back to the land. Let's go back and live in communes. Let's shed our clothes and go nude and let our hair grow out and go eat wild berries. The savage, the noble savage, that we have got to get back to nature. Of course, nobody asks the next one, like, as opposed to what? Well, I know that can make you chuckle, but under ordinary conditions, many of you would not chuckle to that, and some of you didn't chuckle. Well, you think, well, that's not true, because sitting here living in the midst of downtown Manhattan or Atlanta or Detroit, this is not natural. This is not the same as living out in the forest. I don't want to keep picking on you, but I assume you got the gist of my hint. That'd be another litmus test, if you need one, about how low your level of understanding about life is. How far do you have to move from the woods before you're completely out of touch with nature? Or conversely, how far back in the woods? How many of your electronic goodies do you have to get up to get back to living a natural life? And many people say, well, no, wait a minute, that's not funny because I think I should. But then they'd want to bargain. They'd say, well, I'm saving money right now so I can move to the wilds of Idaho and I'm not going to take a television, I'm not going to have a telephone. And you might say, well, how about your Walkman? I go, well, yeah, but I'm going to only take Mozart, maybe a little Brahms, but I'm not going, no rock, no country music, and I'm not going to take a food processor. Well, you understand, they would, and I'm not making fun of the idea. The whole point is, where are you going to move? It is only ordinary minds, the ordinary collective intelligence of man, that believes that a man can live an unnatural life. I repeat again, we're not talking about people who are physically flawed, that are genetically, I'm talking about an ordinary person. To find a man who never thinks of philosophical thought, never has gone to church, never read a New Age book, never gives to charity, seems to only live for the flesh, only drives flashy cars, only goes out with flashy women, lives in a big old high-rise, and we'll get over any possibility of you envying him. I know that's not true. But you see him, and being a more conscious, a more spiritually driven person, you would say, but if you didn't, somebody else would say it for you, that there is a kind of prime example of getting so far from man's natural life that he is actually living in some kind of artificial world. And many people, the kind of people who very likely will show up here first, they can hear such as that and go, yeah. Even if they don't feel real upset, they just think, yeah, that is not natural. How? If you don't understand, there is no such thing as unnatural. If you believe that, then you probably wonder if it's not already a whole new age or a whole new occult group will be ecologists. That we're going to not only harm, but perhaps destroy the planet. Can we all take several seconds in tribute to astounding stupidity passing is enlightenment, is scientific enlightenment, that we are going to destroy the planet. And yet notice, again, I'm not making fun, because the mind can show you statistics. They can show you rises in temperature over here, lower temperature falling over here. Those people never go out and stand next to a volcano. They never go where there's an earthquake coming. They never go where there's a typhoon that's just a half a day away and stand out there on the beach next to the volcano and go, do your worst. We're going to destroy the planet. Right. And that sounds, if you sit at home and you're an ordinary sane person, you can accept that. And there is something going on as life continually balancing itself. But the belief that man is going to destroy the planet, that man could even harm the planet. But you can turn right around, somebody say, well, look over here, look how we have cut down all the trees in this area. And you go, well, yeah, that's true. But life is alive. There is no such thing within a living, closed system, which is what we're in by all three-dimensional appearances. That is, from any appearance, from any view that you can take from the level of consciousness under which you now operate. Within such a closed living system, there is no such thing as bad. Your forefathers used to call it evil, but such as bad. To say, well, look over here, we have cut down, look how horrible it looks. If nothing else, look how we've skint the land, but it's going to affect the ozone layer and this and that. If we did this to the whole planet, we'd kill the planet. All right, let me give them that. Let's say, all right, you're right. Now, may I ask you in private, do you think that we're going to do that? Within ordinary minds will say, well, no, because thank God we finally came to our senses. Now some of us are trying to do something about it. All right. But just between you and I, just real quick, just think to yourself sometime. Do you think the planet was going to let us do that? Do you really think that man can destroy Earth? If you want to play those kind of games like, well, Earth is, I know that people even say this now, that Earth is alive. It's like perhaps, so this beautiful little thing that we're given charge of. I always like that. First, the religions say that man was given charge over all the beasts, not counting himself, of course. But now he's given dominion over the planet, and it's up to him. He's the caretaker. I hate to be crude, but you do realize this reason I was throwing in typhoons, and if you play this anthropomorphical game, planet Earth is actually a person, like with some consciousness. And you think that if it got to the point, too many trees cut down, too much sulfur, too many people smoking, too many beer cans on the street, that life thought, I've had enough of this. You don't think the planet would go like, bad sweat and go, I'm being serious. I don't want to frighten you. Because it's not coming to that. But if it did, the idea that we're going to destroy the planet, if we keep up doing this, and they point at something which is transitional. So I was trying to get to you to see, there's no such thing as bad. There's no such thing actually in a living system as what would qualify as regression. There's transition. If you're alive, you've got parts of you right now, you've got fingernails, ends of your hair, they're dead, if you want to call it that. But it's not dead in the same sense as men saying, well, now we are killing this part of the rainforest by this kind of indiscriminate tree farming. Or we're killing the environment over here because of indiscriminate mining. You can look at it and say, well, the area is almost dead, that this is bad. The mind is correct to say, if we kept this up, it would kill everything. Well, sure it would. And then they go, well, what the hell are you arguing with us for? We're out here marching in the street trying to petition Congress. We've got to stop this. I know you do. And they wouldn't hear me. We got to stop this. And I say, I know you do. And I'm glad they're doing it. If it wasn't them, I'd have to do it. Well, I've hired them to do it. But to continue to operate on the basis that we are in some way saving the planet, that this poor little planet, I mean, if we kept this up, it's just a shame. We'd just ruin it. And boy, then we'd be sorry. That's how long it would take. Or you go sit below a good active volcano, and every day when you think about how man is possibly going to destroy this planet, just take a look at it. Or go move down the Keys and wait for the hurricane season to start. The whole point of that did not have to do with the physical environment or environmentalist, because men believe the same thing having to do with their own internal world. At this level, you can't see past that, because it has brought man from, as it should, but it has brought men from a direct experience of life. And I am not pointing to the past and saying that that is what we lost. You did lose it, but you had to lose it, because you would not have been a man. You lost that direct experience of life when the place in which the circuit is closed, which is complete in you, when it moved up past the lower point in your brainstem up to the point of the cerebral cortex, speaking in general. When it reached there, you no longer directly experience life. But it's not a loss. It was a necessary movement. The experience, the thing that people have always called the awakening, or some reunion with God, or the realization of life, all those, it is the nervous system in an individual that is now being bridged to complete the circuit. You're still alive, but it's being bridged in a place that is not collectively common. When you operate at this level, you can live out your days, you can argue, you can become famous, you can do anything. You simply are alive. It requires no effort, none whatsoever. Contraire, to do otherwise requires effort. It's the only thing that requires any effort. And that's not to make it sound as though some of you may not know it, but you're undertaking a horrendous task. Yeah. That's damn near impossible. In a sense, it's you struggling against 6 billion other people, and they don't know it. And it's not their fault. But you are tied. As long as you're alive, you understand, and your feet's on this planet, which are going to stay there. Don't wait for me to levitate or tell you how. If you could do it and you stayed in there, you would die. Think about that. As long as you're staying on this planet, you are, in a sense, wired up. Really, you are wired up to 6 billion other people. It is an invisible net, and what appears to be social situations is those closest to you seem to have the most effect. If your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, your mother does something adverse, or they do something of some exciting nature. Anyway, if they pull, it seems to have more of an effect. And it becomes less and less specific and more questionable to ordinary mind to say, well, what's going on in Bosnia right now will eventually affect you. You go, oh, yeah. And you're right. Oh, yeah. But it does. Not in any sense that you would ever experience, perhaps, that you would have any physical knowledge thereof. But it affects you in the sense that if you're not conscious to any higher level than where this normally closes the electrical circuit in you, it does affect you. Not that specifically, because if they weren't killing each other in Bosnia, they'd be killing each other in Nigeria. If they weren't doing it there, they'd be doing it somewhere else. Whatever it is that your ordinary mind says, this is of terribly important significance. Yeah, I know, it is. But it's not. Your level of consciousness is absolutely, unconditionally out of your control. The only kind of control that people can attempt to exert is what makes some of the so-called occult and mystical disciplines of continued interest, the whole idea of trying to continually observe yourself. It's been described attempting with every breath, which is tied into, if you're interested, side note, of where the circuit is complete lower in the brain stem, as opposed to the tens of thousands of times per second that's doing from one side of the brain to the other. Lower down is tied more directly to the respiratory system of man. At any rate, the old idea that a man would be more conscious, a man would be enlightened if he could, with every breath, remember the name of Allah, the name of Vishnu. And that was just if a man could remember that he's alive himself with every breath. Yeah. It's what makes it so interesting. It's what many people find to be so captivating. There's a part left out. There's a part that people can't see. I don't mean it's hidden from you, but there's a part that you can't see. If you keep examining yourself to whatever means at that level, nothing happens. I'll put it to you another way, since we're being blunt. If somebody told you the whole idea is that you must have a continual consciousness of watching yourself. And you went through all kinds of effort that I'm going to scratch my head, so I'm going to do it at least slow enough. Maybe they won't notice, I don't exaggerate, but I want to be aware that it's been itching like hell and I'm going to do this. I'm not being funny. This has been used and I understand it quite well. And I could have started off and told somebody to do that. But you end up and there's only so much to observe. I am playing with reality at the ordinary conceived level, but I'm going to put it to you bluntly. If you knew, which you couldn't, but if you knew what you were doing to start with, then what you need to observe, shouldn't take over about 15 seconds. I know it's being funny, and it sounds like some sort of rehash, perhaps Zen Koan to somebody, but it's the idea that if you understood what this was actually about to begin with, which nobody does, it's not an attack on you. You can understand what it is when you start, or else you wouldn't have to start, right? I know sometimes it sounds like, did I tell you one of my older stories? The guy that went to a mystical school, and they asked him, write down a good question. How about that? I'll change it. And so they took it and they handed it to the head guy of the school. And the head guy said, well, stand over there while I look at it. And so he looks at it, and the person says, well, should I stand over here? And he says, no. You go, over here? And he's still sitting there looking at your application. He says, no. You go, how about over here? And he goes, no. And in my story, the guy finally suspected where this was headed. No? If you knew where it was headed, you wouldn't have to ask to start with. So it's not an attack on you. But the thing is, if you understood when I said it's worth all about 15 seconds, it would be a man, I can put it to you several ways. If we said that one of the great honored mystical traditions of trying to to find out what life's about, to suddenly look around and go, that one way to do it, if I said, is to take upon yourself the continuing task to observe everything, the way you're standing, the way you're looking, your gestures, to do that. And it distracts many people. That's why it survived thousands of years. I like that. Plus they can point out to you don't normally do that. You go, no, I don't. And you go, so, well, all right, here's something, you're going to start doing it? Which you can't. But if you knew what you were doing when you started, when I said it's worth about 15 seconds, what is there to observe? You observe just what I told you. You're absolutely out of control, and it doesn't matter. Now, that's the second part. That's what they leave out. The first part, the great schools and the great mystical books and whatever's left, they will all the time, in their own way, they all come down to saying the same thing, and they've got some sort of, the background varies from culture to culture and time to time about why we're in this less than satisfactory condition, why we've been cursed, or how we misstepped somewhere as a group or individually. But still what they're saying is, you have now got to undertake some sort of study of yourself and see what the problem is. You've got to understand it, and they tell you that there is a problem that can be cured, but you've got to work on it. And it may be a lifetime struggle. Yeah, it may be a lifetime struggle. It's according to how dumb you are. I repeat again, it's not just a joke, and it's certainly not an attack on you. Because the thing is, what you need to observe, they can say, we're just out of control. We just don't know what's going on. And the ordinary mind will go, yes, yes, yes. But it always looks out somewhere else. Oh, yes, you're right. Because what everybody's mind's doing is, boy, aren't they? But they don't know it. It's not like my original story. They don't know that the person running the gas pump and making change at the market, they don't know that they're out of control. The ordinary mind does not know that cars, maybe 200 or 300 in your eyesight, flying down a multi-lane, 5 or 6 lanes on an interstate at 80 miles an hour, all of them are out of control. That is, none of them are under conscious control. But the ordinary mind does not know that. In some apparent school, they rehashing, if you just get it from a book or someone who does not understand, someone who does not have the experience, and they're trying to reteach it. It can certainly appeal to people, but to say that you're out of control, people go, yeah, because all you got to do is give people a little kick, push them around, insult them, and people go, yeah, I deserved it. You go, it's a good thing you people found me. I mean, you're as dumb as the sheep. Boy, it's a good thing you found me. And people go, it is. Boy, sure I'm glad. Well, what does it take to do that? I could become a priest or a rabbi. I could have been your mother. I could have adopted you as a pet to go, bad boy, bad boy. It's just natural. But there's nothing mystical about it. You will just submit. You're either the head dog in some little pack. You may be the head dog in your pack between you and the woman you go with, or vice versa nowadays. Turnabout's good. Or you got a group of friends, and you get together. There may be 2 or 3 of you that show up here together, and you probably leave here, and one of you sort of in charge of reinterpreting later on at a coffee shop what I said, straightening out what I said. And it's not that one of you is better than the other, but groups of people, anytime you see a couple is one thing, that's still sexual. But let me expand it a little bit. You see 3 or 4 people, the same sex, or 2 or 3 couples that hang out together and talk about all sorts of matters. You're dealing with a wolf pack. Now, they will say that they have things that they hold intellectually or spiritually in common interest, but it's a wolf pack, and somebody will be dominating it. That's the only basis I was saying that is the basis of all organizations at the ordinary level, even those that are apparently a mystical school of some kind. That's why you got a head monk, why you got a guy in a robe, why you got a guy with, funny spots on his head or a turban. You got a guy that there's some mystique about, and he's the guy that his main responsibility is to go, oh, bad boys and girls, a good thing you got here. And you go, yeah. It is a part of it. It's almost impossible not to do it. It's almost impossible for people to stay seated if they don't feel like that you're giving them a little dose of that. They at least want to know, all right, we're going to dance. You're going to lead? They got to know what you're going to lead. That's what it amounts to. That's what wolves are doing when they all put their tail between their legs. When the alpha male gets there, chimpanzees, they're about to do a tango. It may be him and 40 females and 20 young males. But they know one thing. They're all going to get on this side and dance backwards. He's going to dance forward, which is the same thing as bad boys, bad wolves, bad people. It's a good thing you found me. Then you go through, don't lose your place, you go through these kind of procedures like trying to observe yourself, that they say, well, you've got to learn the nature of man. Remember, the oracle spoke to Socrates and said, the unexamined life is not worth living. True, but the examined life that takes more than 15 seconds is a waste of time, so to speak. Because you look and you go, I'm out of control. But they told you that. They got to tell you what to look for. Now, I want you people, I'm going to send you home tonight, and I want you, it's going to be your duty. If you're going to come back here, you've got to start. As soon as I say, well, that's all for tonight, I want you to stand up real slowly. Don't be doing this out enough to cause people to look at you funny, but I want you to start holding an awareness, just physically. You're going to stand up by your chair, reach for your coat. You're going to do all this, and you're going to observe. And what you're going to realize is that you're just out of control because you do things and you don't know it. You've been doing them all your life, and you're out of control. And some of you would already begin, and I say some of you, speaking generically, some people that heard that would already begin to sense, ooh, that could be true. And then they even, what few times you could remember between now and next time we met, if we were going to, then every now and then you might remember a few times you would observe and go, that's true, I was just doing things just then, I was out of control. He was right, or the system was right. It was half right. They left out the the one part. You're out of control, but it doesn't matter. You will not start a whole new occult or religion on that basis to tell people, you're all out of control, you're bad wolves, you're bad chimps. And they go, yeah. You go, but it doesn't matter. Who the hell's going to join up some organization like that? Well, what's the rest of it? That's when it gets interesting. Now, do you understand why I'm saying if you knew what you were doing to begin with, what is there to observe? It should take 15 seconds. It takes, let's say, 13 seconds to observe I'm out of control. That is, I have no conscious control. I don't even know what I'm going to say next. And here I am appealing for votes. I'm trying to get them to elect me Pope. I'm trying to get the Cardinals. I'm trying to get somebody to vote for me for Prime Minister, for God's sake, of Greece. This is my whole life. And I don't know what, my mouth just opens and I just talk. People go, I'm out of control. Let's say it takes 12 seconds. The next 3 at most should be, but it don't make a goddamn. Because you instantaneously, you understand that everybody else, the electorate, everybody dancing with you, everybody wants to dance with you, the whole world, you suddenly glance around and you realize we're all on the same level. And it does not matter. That's the part that's left out. That's why self-observation of that sort. Now, perhaps you see, at least theoretically, in words, the humor of me saying it's, if you know what you're doing to begin with, it's worth 15 seconds. To understand that, you can spend a lifetime. If for some reason you decide that I was going to keep this up, and you decide, by God, I'm taking up with you, and I'll study this. And what's the study I pointed out to you? There are other things. I don't mean I'm fixing to run the ground here because there's something you can do. But you understand the whole idea that you're going to study yourself, that the unexamined life is not worth living, and therefore I'm going to examine my life. Okay, but get on with it. You got to learn how to do it, to look around and go, well, I'll be damned. And realize, well, so that was it. That doesn't matter. Now on to something worthwhile. The whole world operates absolutely not theoretically, not metaphorically. Life is a live, ordinary consciousness. Well, humans, ordinary intellectual people, civilized people, they can agree if you look around and you describe life in the jungle, the life of beasts, life of moose, caribou, wolves, chimpanzees, and you say, well, every creature but man, their whole life is almost just a piece of machinery. And people, ordinary people, zoologists, psychologists, sociologists, theologians, ordinary people, if they know enough, they go, yeah, that's true. And you can almost push them, this doesn't matter, but science itself, that is, one part of the ordinary level of human consciousness now is almost the part that I might not get a big argument pointing out that, now they would have to say the environment of the planet is mechanical. It is like a piece of machinery. It's like a big weather machine, which is the heart of it, and it's a big energy machine from the sun and et cetera, and it just operates to the point that scientists, let's use them, people who supposedly know, they've studied it, they understand that the sun suddenly, if the planet just tipped 1 degree, we'd all be dead in 2 months. If it tipped 2 degrees, we'd be dead in 2 weeks. If the sun simply dimmed, if for some reason the sun began to wear down just overnight, and the amount of energy it puts out dropped 1.8%, we'd be dead in 6 months. All that, so in other words, it is like a huge piece of machinery. Men will do that. And you can almost take it to all other life on this planet, that they would almost go with it with animals. That it's a little harder to observe because they can't get it all under a microscope, and they can't get it all in a laboratory, and it doesn't all fit, they don't have enough statistical information, but they would almost agree that, yeah, you're close, that the animal world is almost it's just a food chain, it's, eat, be eaten, die, just the whole thing is almost like a piece of energy transfer machinery. They would almost go along with that. But then if you say, well, human consciousness is the same way, it's tied to the same system, even if they would tolerate the idea and entertain it for a second, they go, you don't mean that literally. Oh, yeah, I do. Then they just lose interest because the mind says that's absolutely not true. So you understand, assuming I'm telling you that which is not incorrect or misleading, until you see that, you are at, shall we say, a severe disadvantage. You're trying to do things that have already been done. You're trying to do things that are not only impossible, even if you could do them, they're a waste of time. That is, well, I'm going to work on observing myself until I can do it 24 hours a day. Boy, would you be pissed if you, again, I'm playing with things, if you actually could do that and you went that long on the basis of what you think it amounts to, and finally, just let's say on your deathbed, to that kind of Hollywood serendipity, just as you're about to die, it suddenly hits you what it is. Boy, you'd like to get hold of somebody. I don't know who you, I guess you'd strangle whoever's closest to you. Wait a minute, I spent 82 years doing that one thing, and now I see what it is. You can interfere with the way the energy jumps, which is the physical, it is the literal basis upon which all of this has always been placed. Forget whether they understood it to that degree or not, but the whole idea of trying to remember something, trying to remember the name of Vishnu with every breath, trying to remember that you are here with every breath, trying to remember anything, trying to continually hold a part of your consciousness away to observe your life. All of that is based upon a physical something, and it can be approached in a much more direct manner. I certainly can't guarantee it because I didn't drag you in here, and I don't have your phone number, and I'm not ever going to call you to come back. I say all that on the basis I cannot guarantee it'll work because I didn't bring you here. I know how to do it more efficiently than all of that because every generation does. Every time somebody that understands this understands it, it always improves. I can't particularly take credit for it. Like I said, I don't impress me. I can't particularly take credit for it, but I know how to do it better than Buddha did, or Jesus did, or anybody that died 50 years ago. I mean, if they're dead, you got to face it. You're not going to learn much from them. I'll put it to you that way. Because I can remember the people I wanted to meet, I thought, boy, wouldn't it have been great if I'd been alive when so-and-so was alive. You got to look at it this way. If he'd have mattered that much, why'd he die, all right? You sort of had to press on. I might add, thank God. Because if you didn't, if you get hung up for the rest of it, you may have an entertaining hobby for the rest of your life, but you'll never know what's going on. There's a way to interfere with it. There's a way to interrupt it. Because if you do not bring, and it's literal, I have drawn you a not untoward drawing of how there are a few other things involved, obviously. Well, this electrical, the closing of that electrical circuit, the completion of it, is literally, physically what keeps you alive. A dead person, they still worry about how to define death, and etc. The electricity is gone. The lights, they have turned out the lights at Grandma Edna's house. I mean, if she's dead, the lights are out, and you can't get them back on. She no longer completes the circuit. The earth then does something else to you. It then eats you, and you, etc. But you are no longer alive by any definition. You're dead meat, and that's it. You no longer complete the circuit. It's what getting old is. It's what wearing down is. It's tied to the same thing. But here you are, we'll all assume, in the prime of life. You're still alive. You can stay alive no matter how you bitch and complain, no matter how you say that you're struggling to do otherwise, no matter how you say you're reflecting upon some of the curios and some of the follies and the faux pas and the anomalies of life, and you're trying to figure them out, etc. There's nothing to figure out. You can feel, you can see the energy completing itself in you, and as long as you stay at that level, there is no movement. Forget any idea of escape or some sort of enlightenment. There is nothing. But there's nothing wrong. You've got to remember that now. This is not the salvation of humanity. This is not the salvation of you, even. It could be the satisfaction of you, or I'll always go this far, that nobody's ever had the experience and ever asked for their money back. Nobody's ever went, that's it. Or those of you of a more crude and down-to-earth nature, it is just absolutely, I guess, the most fun you can have, unstoned with your clothes on. How about that? But it is an individual experience. This I do not call collective intelligence for no reason. It is not a group project. No one can, in a sense, help you do it. It is not going to rub off. You cannot go and put your head next to Buddha or Muhammad, that if they were here and in some way pop over into your head. That's not where it operates. You got to remember this circuit. It starts on one leg, it goes up, it goes as high as need be, and it goes out. That's it. Even if you were with somebody, that their circuit was complete at a higher level, to use spatial terms, somewhere else, and you put your head there, that's not the way the circuit runs. The circuit that keeps you alive is individual to you. And if there's going to be anything done, it is an individual project. You have got to, for the time being, I'm going to call it, interrupt it. You have to have a personal control over what happens continually with this. If we're going to meet him more, I was going to stop it at more or less an hour, because I have some experience with doing this with people starting out. I'll be here again next Tuesday. If enough of you get interested, we'll meet more if you wanted to. We'll see how it goes. I'll do it more than once a week. If you got more questions, now that you feel like maybe somebody that you'd been tricked, that you wrote me a personal question, and I said, don't ask dumb or personal questions. Every time we meet, feel quite free to put them up here, and I'll look at them. I'm not ignoring them. And some of them I've even though I didn't read them out, I did take into consideration in some of the things I said tonight. If this is what you belong in, nobody knows. Even if I did know, I wouldn't tell you. If I had the ability to look out there and go, yeah, I can see who belongs here and who doesn't. Unless something extraordinary happened and we continue this, I'm not fixing to turn around and tell you just on the surface of it that, hey, I've seen your type before, you'll never make it. I'm not going to do that. It's up to you. It cannot be guaranteed, but if this is what you're after, then this is it. Because I am not talking about some theory, but it's not something that can be guaranteed, and there is no course, there is no real linear sequence to it, which is not absolutely true. But I feel obliged to tell you that. That is, just because if you come X number of weeks, or we met X number of years or lifetimes, who knows? But if this is what you want, there's nothing like it. And it's not all that strange. Except when you have it, it is absolutely strange because it changes everything about life. You're still alive, you can still get sick, you're sure as hell still going to die. But everything that seems to be of any curiosity, anything that's any problem, every question you have, the whole idea is, I'm telling you, you simply look out. I hate to get all real mystical and technical, but you look out and you realize what the hell's going on. The Pope doesn't know. The Prime Ministers do not know. Your mother doesn't know. Your best friends don't know. Einstein didn't know. Molecular biologists do not know. At any given time on this planet, I'm not going to deal with numbers or somebody start some. There's damn few people at any given time, damn few people that know. But you can just, the whole experience is you look around and suddenly you realize what the hell's going on. It may not sound like much, but as I said, those people that done it, there's no trace in history, and plus I know history is not written down, trust me. Nobody has ever went, wait a minute, that's it. Nobody has ever had any complaint. That's enough. Until, as I said, I'll be here next Tuesday again, and if enough of you keep showing back up, and you want to, we'll do it a couple of times a week, and I'll get more and more specific, and I won't laugh at your questions. I did cover most of them other than the personal ones. You could remember this, not that I'm taking on even the imagined mantle of being your hero, but the whole idea of having heroes, imagining that there's something of worthwhile in somebody, something personal, is always the hero. It's trying to sort of deify the head wolf and under whatever conditions it is. But you understand the whole idea of heroes, all the way from children dealing with Superman or whoever it is, the Ninja Turtles, all the way to you having an idea, you generically, of a Buddha or somebody. The whole idea of a hero is somebody that's already done all the work for you. That's all it represents. That's it. People do not ordinarily see it that way when they think it's moved from the area of physical Superman. But when it gets into areas less specific, exotic and esoteric, they never think about it that way. But what is the whole idea? Thinking, boy, I wish I could have met Lao, a man that awake. I mean, if I'd just been there, it would have rubbed off in some way. The reason you like the idea of even spiritual or metaphysical Superman is the whole idea, well, they already did all the work for it. If I'd met him, I bet in some way I could really ingratiated myself, you know, kissed his ring and really kind of warmed up to him, and he'd go, oh, all right, kid, here. And since he'd already done it and knew how to do it, some way he could really, you know, give me some kind of jolt. Maybe. Maybe not.